Ever feel like time is kind of slipping through your fingers?
Yeah.
Like it's more than just, minutes and hours on a clock.
It's a question that's puzzled philosophers and scientists for centuries, right? What is time, really?
Exactly. And today we're going deep, diving into this mind-bending idea of two-dimensional time, all based on Z.T. Tosha's work.
Fascinating stuff. Challenging, but definitely fascinating.
Definitely. And I got to admit, the source material can get pretty dense.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we're going to break it all down, make it, well, as digestible as possible.
Absolutely. We'll try to make it clear, engaging, and hopefully thought-provoking.
You with me on this?
I am ready to explore.
Awesome. So Tosha starts with this really interesting premise, right? He says that the universe, at its core, is actually simple.
Yeah, and that's kind of a radical idea when you think about it. I mean, especially when we look at like physics with all its complex formulas and theories,
Yeah.
it doesn't exactly scream simplicity.
Right, like my brain starts to hurt just thinking about quantum mechanics and all that.
Exactly. But Tosha's point is that it's us, humanity, that tends to overcomplicate things. Like we kind of obscure this underlying simplicity with our need to categorize and explain everything.
So it's not that the universe is inherently complex, but we make it that way.
Yeah. He uses this analogy of a single note, right? Like imagine a single note vibrating, resonating throughout the cosmos.
Okay, I can kind of visualize that.
And that single note, that pure vibration, expresses itself in like a million different forms. It's kind of like how a prism can take white light and split it into all the colors of the rainbow.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
So maybe instead of getting all tangled up in separate forces like, gravity or electromagnetism or the strong and weak forces, what if it's all just different expressions of one unified
So
force?
it's not four separate forces, it's like four sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And that force, that fundamental vibration, well, it might just be the key to understanding what the universe really is.
Okay, that's a pretty big shift in perspective. So how does this idea of a unified force connect to this whole two-dimensional time thing?
Well, it's all about understanding the underlying fabric of reality itself. You see, Tosha suggests that energy waves are the key players here. Like they formed the very essence of everything.
Like ripples on a pond or
Yeah.
waves in the ocean.
Yeah, exactly. And just like those waves carry energy, across the water, these fundamental waves, they could be responsible for, well, everything. The movement of galaxies, the interactions of particles, and yeah, even, as Tosha proposes, the very flow of time.
Hold on, time is a wave. And that's a pretty wild concept. Doesn't that, like, totally contradict our everyday experience of time? I mean, we experience it as a straight line, right? Past, present, future.
It does. It definitely challenges how we normally think about time. But Tosha suggests that what we perceive as linear time, that straight line, it's really just one dimension of a much larger, multidimensional reality.
Okay, so there's more to time than meets the eye, literally. But before we dive into two-dimensional time, you mentioned something about particle interactions. How do they fit into all of this?
Oh, yeah. Well, Tosha draws this really interesting parallel between the way particles interact and the complexity of weather patterns. It's like trying to predict the exact path of a single particle is, well, it's kind of like trying to predict the weather with like 100% certainty. It's pretty much impossible.
You're saying there's an inherent, like, unpredictability at that level.
Yeah, exactly. Scientists use probabilities to understand how particles behave because, well, you can't know both the position and the momentum of a particle at the same time. It's a fundamental limit.
Yeah.
And that's where Heisenberg's uncertainty principle comes into play.
So it's not just a limitation of our tools or technology, it's built into how reality works.
That's what Tosha argues. Our need for absolute certainty, our discomfort with not knowing, it kind of blinds us to the true nature of the universe.
Embracing uncertainty is a fundamental. Wow, okay. How does this tie back into the idea of two-dimensional time?
Well, it all circles back to this concept of the ether, an idea that modern science kind of dismissed, but Tosha brings it back in a really thought-provoking way.
Wait, the ether, isn't that like an outdated concept from like way back in the 19th century?
You're right, it kind of fell out of favor, but Tosha's suggesting that the ether isn't, a literal substance. It's more like the fundamental medium through which energy flows. It's this invisible web that connects everything in the universe.
So instead of just empty space, we've got this vibrant, interconnected field of energy.
Yeah, that's the idea. And if the ether really does exist, it could totally change how we understand not just energy and light, but maybe even consciousness. But to really understand how all this connects to two-dimensional time, we need to look at how Tosha sees time as a creative force. And that's where things get really interesting. We were just talking about the ether, remember, that underlying fabric of reality. Well, this is where Tosha's concept of two-dimensional time really comes into play.
Yeah, so far we've gone from this idea of a unified force to time as a wave to the ether. What's next?
Right. Well, think about those waves of time. Imagine them vibrating not just in one direction, but in multiple dimensions,
Mm.
all at the same time. It creates like this field of infinite possibilities.
So instead of a straight line, time's more like a vibrating drumhead.
That's a great way to think about it. And now Tosha brings in this idea of the sieve of
The
creation.
sieve of creation. Okay,
Yeah.
what's that?
It's like this multi-dimensional filter. It takes the raw potential of the ether and shapes it, molds it into the light and matter that we experience.
Mm, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. So the ether is like this formless potential, and then the sieve of two-dimensional time.
Yeah.
It's what gives it structure, gives it form.
Yeah, it's a bit like think of a musician tuning an instrument.
Right.
They adjust the strings to create specific frequencies, those notes, but it's the spaces between the notes, the intervals that's where the music really comes alive.
So it's not just the vibrations themselves, it's like the spaces between them that actually matter.
Exactly. Tosha suggests that the oscillations of two-dimensional time, they work in a similar way, creating intervals within the ether. That's where creation happens.
This is blowing my mind. Does Tosha give like any real world examples of how this sieve of creation thing actually plays out?
He does. One example he gives is photosynthesis. We usually think of it as plants using sunlight to create energy.
Right. Pretty basic stuff,
Yeah,
right?
sure, on the surface. But Tosha's saying the light, it carries an imprint, like a blueprint of those two-dimensional time oscillations. And those, they interact with the molecular rhythms of the plant. It creates the conditions for photosynthesis to occur.
So it's not just a simple chemical reaction happening. It's like light and time and those etheric vibrations all working together.
Precisely. And he has another example, the expansion of the universe. Instead of just seeing it as this simple linear expansion, what if it's being driven by the outward pulse of those two-dimensional time rhythms?
Whoa. So the universe isn't just expanding, it's like pulsing, breathing with the rhythms of this creative time.
That's the idea. Tosha even suggests these rhythms might be woven into the fabric of space-time itself. It has some pretty profound implications for how we understand the universe and our place in it, too.
It definitely does. But all this talk about two-dimensional time, shaping reality, does that mean we have no control? Are we just along for the ride?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of Tosha's philosophical ideas. He argues that while two-dimensional time is this creative force, we're not just passive observers.
So we have agency. We can actually influence this process.
This is where it gets really fascinating. Tosha says one-dimensional time, that linear time that we experience, it creates this psychological dependence on the future, makes us fixated on what's to come instead of being present.
So the way we perceive time is actually limiting our experience of reality.
Exactly. He says two-dimensional time, with its emphasis on the present moment, on infinite possibility, it gives us a way to break free from that linear trap.
Whoa, okay, this is a lot to take in. So we're not just shaped by two-dimensional time, we can potentially shape it too.
Tosha doesn't come right out and say that, but
Like,
but if two-dimensional time is this underlying creative force, it's not crazy to imagine that our thoughts, our actions, they're creating ripples in that field. They're influencing the flow of possibilities.
so we're not just passengers on this cosmic journey. We're actually like shaping the landscape as we move through it.
Now that's a powerful way to think about it. It suggests a level of responsibility. It's humbling and empowering all at the same time.
It really is. But if two-dimensional time is constantly creating, constantly shaping reality,
Mhm.
what does that mean for things like free will and destiny?
Those are big questions, and I don't think Tosha claims to have all the answers, but his work, it invites us to embrace the mystery, the paradox of living in a world where we are both shaped by and shaping the very fabric of time itself.
Okay, wow. You've given me a lot to think about. Two worlds of time, this vibrating sieve of creation, and then the possibility that we're actually co-creating reality with every thought and action. I need a minute to process all of this.
Take your time. It's a journey, right? And it
Yeah.
unfolds in layers. You discover new insights as you go deeper. And maybe the most important layer is figuring out how this concept of two-dimensional time can impact our lives, how it can shift our perspective and open us up to new possibilities.
I think, yeah, I think I'm starting to get a sense of what Tosha's getting at here.
Yeah.
This whole two-dimensional time idea, it's so fast though, almost overwhelming.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to wrap our heads around something that feels so far outside of our everyday experience?
You're right. It's not something we can easily grasp, not with our linear minds. But maybe the key isn't to try and understand it intellectually, but to experience it directly.
Experience two-dimensional time, but how? I mean, it seems so abstract, so theoretical.
Remember how we were talking about those ripples, those little hints of two-dimensional time, at work in the world around us? What if we started paying more attention to those moments? Where time seems to kind of to bend, to flow in these unexpected ways.
You mean like those moments of synchronicity,
Yeah.
where things just seem to line up perfectly,
Ah,
almost magically, you know?
exactly. Like think about those times when you're thinking of someone and then they call you completely out of the blue. Or you stumble upon the exact piece of information you need right when you need it.
Yeah, yeah. Those moments always feel so strange.
Yeah.
Like there's some unseen hand, some force at work behind the scenes.
Tosha would probably say that those are glimpses of two-dimensional time breaking through, into our linear perception. It's like
Yeah.
in those moments the boundaries of past, present, future, they kind of dissolve a little and we get a taste of how interconnected everything really is.
So instead of trying to define two-dimensional time, we should be looking for its fingerprints. Like looking for those moments where it shows itself in our lives.
Right. And by becoming more attuned to those moments we can start to change our relationship with time itself. Instead of being ruled by the clock, we can become more present, more aware of the infinite potential that's unfolding in each moment.
So it's about learning to dance with time, right?
Yeah.
To move with its rhythms instead of constantly trying to control it.
Beautifully put. Imagine stepping out of the narrow river of linear time and into this vast ocean of two-dimensional time, where every moment is a point of creation and every possibility exists all at once.
Wow, that's a powerful image. Makes it feel less intimidating and more like an invitation. Like an invitation to explore a new way of being in the world.
That's exactly what it is, an invitation. And who knows what we might discover when we open ourselves to this new perspective, right?
This whole deep dive has been quite a journey. I've got more questions than answers now, but in a good way. It's really expanded my sense of what's possible.
That's the power of exploring these big ideas. They don't always give us, concrete answers,
Yeah.
but they shake things up, challenge our assumptions, open us up to new ways of seeing the world.
So to our listener, I say this. Pay attention to those ripples, those subtle hints of two-dimensional time at work in your own life. You might just find yourself seeing the universe and your place in it in a whole new light.